What is going on, Nuggets Nation, NBA fans? I am Tom Leuthner. Welcome back to Nuggets Today. So, since there are no rumors out right now for Denver, at least, I want to break down the season and talk about some potentials, obviously, because that's all we got to talk about right now. The first thing I want to do is break down the fact that Denver are still they are still contenders realistically with Jokic on the team, and if everybody's healthy. I still think that there may be one or two guys away. I'm not saying they aren't, and obviously Denver was hurt going into it, but let's break down this postseason at least. You go into the postseason with David Adelman, who had 3 regular season games, and that's all the experience that he had. You go into the postseason with Michael Porter Jr., who gets hurt almost right away and only has one shoulder. You end the postseason with Aaron Gordon barely able to walk. You have Jokic, who goes down, doesn't go down rather, but gets a little bit of an elbow injury, it looked like, in the first game of the second round. Jamal Murray gets sick at the end of it. Obviously, it's tough. You're going against so much. Do I think that they win the finals if everybody's healthy? Maybe not. Do I think they win the finals if their entire roster is healthy? That's possible. Do I think if they go into the playoffs with Julian Strawther and not coming off an injury, with Deron Holmes as their backup big? Yeah, I think that they're legitimate contenders. I still think, again, maybe they're one more guy short of that. That's something I'm going to get into in a little while, what I think they should look into doing. But at the same time, MPJ was playing with one shoulder, and he was still getting all the rebounds he could and fighting through it. Aaron Gordon literally admitted that he could barely run in the last game of Game 7. But you're pushing 2 teams to Game 7s that probably shouldn't have been close realistically. Looking back or watching this series now with the Timberwolves Thunder down 3-1 for the Timberwolves, Denver was legit. They are legitimate contenders. Imagine they had 1 or 2 more guys on their bench that can actually compete with the Thunder. The Timberwolves they're not able to compete. Maybe they took one game down to the wire, blew them out. But obviously teams are going to have the games that they lose. And I'm not saying they aren't, but Denver is legit. They did this without a healthy roster. And I know, again, I'm finally cooled off of the rumors of getting rid of MPJ and everything like that. But at the same time, Denver is still there if they get 1 or 2 guys. Talking about those 1 or 2 guys, I'm going to break down some people that I think Denver should consider. They have, I believe it was 2 minimum contracts to give or 1 mid-level exception. There's some minimum guys that I would look at depending on how your roster is structured this next year, depending on who your GM is, and that's something I'm going to get into. But the guys I want to break down right now, if Denver's not able to get Hanson Yang, who is somebody I said they should go out and target, I think they should. Obviously, he's a draft. He's in the draft, and you'd have to trade somebody for a second-round pick. I think you go out, and Denver should try to get Luke Kornet. He's on the older side, sure. In New York, he was able to shoot. Do I think you need him to shoot? No, I think you just need him to play backup big man minutes, which is what he can do. And if Deron Holmes is as good as everybody thinks he can be, then he can play the 4 on the bench with Luke Kornet, and that gives you a fresh set of legs almost everywhere on the court. Another guy that I think Denver should target, there's a few guys here that I listed down, is Taurean Prince. He averaged 8 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, shot 44%, just around 44% from 3. That's an amazing pickup. He was able to play some starter minutes for Milwaukee this year. That's a playoff team. Why not bring him in and bring him off the bench? He's a pretty good defender. He's not the worst defender in the world. He's able to shoot from 3. That's what you need. You need bench shooters. You have a guy like Strawther, who obviously I rave about, and he's able to create his own shots off the bench. Now imagine having somebody who can play a little bit of defense, who can sit in the corner, hit shots, and you know what? He can get minutes if a guy like Brown goes down at all and we need a new starter. If MPJ's hurt, Taurean Prince would be able to start. Obviously, I know there's a lot around the Bruce Brown talk, and that's something I covered. I think he would be good for Denver. He would have to accept a vet minimum in order to come there if Denver wants to sign anybody else with him, which is what I think he understands they need and what Denver knows they need. Another guy who I think could be pretty good for Denver is Alec Burks. He averaged 7, 2.5, and 1 on 42% from three-point shooting. The main reason I'm looking at these guys is you look at what's happening in the playoffs right now and look at the teams that are winning. Teams with bench shooters. A team like the Timberwolves, I believe they might start Nas right here and there, but he's able to hit threes if you need him to. A team like the Pacers, who have Nembhard and Nesmith, who both start, who could hit threes, and then you have a guy like Ben Shepherd coming off the bench and hitting corner threes, who didn't get a single minute in round 1. I know the Knicks are very limited, but you have a team like the Thunder, who obviously we watched. Caruso, Isaiah Joe, Casey Wallace, Aaron Wiggins. These guys, Kenrich Williams even could hit threes if they need him to. These are all guys, and that's why I'm so fixated on the 3-point bench players, because again, Deron Holmes is there, Strother's there, Watson's there, but now imagine you're able to play Watson with shooters around him. If Russ accepts his option, you have Russ who's able to set guys up from the corner and actually hit the threes. And again, these guys can come in and start if Denver needs them to, if somebody goes down. A few other names I want to list are D'Anthony Melton. I know he dealt with injuries, but he can also be a backup point guard if Russ does decline the option. And what I think might be the biggest guy if he doesn't retire, and I know he's at the tail end of his career, is Seth Curry. He averaged 6.5 points, shot 45% from three when he was on Charlotte, which is the highest three-point percentage I believe he's had throughout his career so far. He would be phenomenal if Denver can bring another guy in with him, whether that be Cornette, whether that be a guy like Alec Burks, whether that be Taurean Prince, who I think is an awesome fit realistically off the bench, whether that be a guy like the last guy I want to cover, and that is Talen Horton-Tucker. I know he's on the younger side out of all these guys I just covered, but maybe he comes into Denver, maybe he gets those minutes off the bench, and maybe he's actually attempting to find the contract that he thinks he deserves. Again, why not give him the chance? Why not bring him in? And I think, again, like I said, that's one thing with Adelman that I think was a little bit, I guess he struggled with, was extending the rotation, because you don't know those guys yet. I know that you know who they are, they're in your organization, but you didn't have much experience with them, especially because you only had 3 regular season games. The biggest thing is who brings those guys in, and that's what I want to break down now. The personality that Denver should consider when looking for a GM. I know that I'm not the owner, obviously, and, Josh Kroenke's doing his thing. Again, pronunciation was right that time, I think at least, but bring in a GM that's not like Calvin Booth. I know Calvin Booth had his high moments. He drafted Brown, he drafted Strother, he drafted Deron Holmes, he got Watson, but I think he was so fixated on Watson and Pickett being 2 guys that were so good because they were sort of sleeper picks that he couldn't get over the fact that they weren't that good. I know that all the reports came out, Malone wanted to play Westbrook, and Calvin Booth was fighting him to play Jalen Pickett. I think Jalen Pickett's the worst out of all the guys that Booth got. I think that you need to look at somebody who's not so egotistical, who doesn't always think they're right, but can also make moves that may help the team. I think that Booth was so fixated on his draft picks and the people that he drafted that he didn't want to bring anybody in, and all he cared about, and obviously I know the money was tight and Denver was in a tough situation, all he cared about was his guys getting minutes. The guys that he drafted. Not the guys the team has, the guys that he drafted. But the last thing I want to cover is one potential fit for Denver at GM. And I know I covered Ben Tenzer. And actually, next episode is going to be all about potential GMs. But there's some other possibilities out there. And this is the longest shot. That's why I want to cover it here. But is there any opportunity for Denver to bring back Tim Connelly, former Denver GM? This is a guy, if you look back at it, he drafted Jokic. He drafted the sleeper pick in Nikola Jokic, who's the best player in the NBA, in my opinion. He brought in MPJ when people were scared to take a chance on him. He got Jamal Murray, which was great. He traded Gary Harris, who was awesome for Denver when he was there for a few years, for Aaron Gordon, and took that shot, and it worked out. We won a finals. Denver won a finals because of him. I know that he is the president of basketball operations for the Wolves. I know that the only possibility for Denver to get him is if he opts out of his contract. Again, do I think it's realistic? No. Do I pray that it happens? 100%. Like I said, tomorrow I'll get into all the GMs I think would work in Denver, or the potential GMs they can bring in. But at the same time, if Tim Connelly is able to come out, opt out of his contract, come back to Denver, and rebrand Denver, I think that's the ideal situation. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys for checking it out. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'll catch you guys tomorrow to break it down.